And finally, new rule, the smartest thing Democrats did this year was finding their patriotism again. If you told me a year ago that if Kamala Harris would be the nominee and in her acceptance speech she would use the word privilege, I would not have guessed that she used it the way she did. America's founders, they were the Gen Z of their day. And when they were your age, they started a country. What the fuck have you done?
Bill Maher just did something that shocked even his biggest fans. On his show Real Time, he didn't aim his critique at Republicans. He turned it inward toward his own party. His targets? Gen Z Democrats, Vice President Kamala Harris, and what he called the growing resentment industry within the left. In just a few minutes, Maher delivered a scathing critique of what he sees as the Democratic Party's biggest blind spot, and it instantly set the internet ablaze. But this wasn't typical political commentary. Maher wasn't cracking jokes for laughs. He laid out an argument that was personal, historical, and brutally direct. Whether you agree with him or not, it was impossible to ignore. Before we dive into Maher's sharp takedown of democratic delusions and progressive fantasies, don't forget to subscribe, hit the notification bell, and join the conversation in the comments below. This one's going to be controversial, fiery, and packed with receipts. So let's get into it.
And finally, new rule, the smartest thing Democrats did this year was finding their patriotism again. If you told me a year ago that if Kamala Harris would be the nominee and in her acceptance speech she would use the word privilege, I would not have guessed that she used it the way she did.
Maher opened his segment with something few expected. He actually praised the Democrats. He said the smartest thing the party had done this year was rediscovering its sense of patriotism. That alone caught many viewers off guard. For years, Democrats have been criticized for focusing too heavily on the country's flaws while often overlooking its strengths. Maher acknowledged that he didn't expect to hear Vice President Kamala Harris using terms like privilege in a way that didn't attack the system, but instead emphasized how far the country has come. He gave credit where it was due. Both Harris and Minnesota Governor Tim Walz delivered speeches that, for once, sounded unapologetically pro-America. But then Maher made a sharp pivot.
Yes, America, the only place in the world where a white guy from the suburbs could become a millionaire rapper, because here every person, regardless of race, class, or gender, has the right to be talent-free. And guess what document allows you to protest and chant, hey, hey, ho, ho, followed by something really stupid? Yeah, Constitution Day was last week. It's an actual federal holiday, but no one noticed despite the fact that it's probably the greatest legal document ever. Is it flawed? Of course. It was written by humans, and they were all white men, as depicted in this illustration from Google AI.
Maher asked the question most Democrats avoid. Why didn't that pro-America message resonate with Gen Z? If the party was finally striking the right tone, why wasn't the younger generation responding? He didn't leave the question unanswered. Maher pointed to older Democrats, the very people trying to fix the messaging, as part of the problem. According to him, the party spent the last decade dismantling America's image and replacing it with a constant narrative of guilt, shame, and systemic failure. That message, he argued, wasn't just political. It became a belief system passed down through schools, social media, entertainment, and major institutions that shaped Gen Z's worldview. The result? A generation that sees the United States not as a work in progress, but as a fundamentally broken system with little worth defending. And that's where Maher's warning really takes shape. If the next wave of leaders doesn't believe in a core value of the country they're inheriting, what, exactly, will they replace it with?
But how about looking at the actual ideas in it? I won't hold my breath for that, because only 14% of 8th graders are proficient in history now, and only 22% in civics, which may be why 4 in 10 Gen Zers say the authors of the Constitution are best described as villains.
The moment Bill Maher asked why Gen Z didn't connect with pro-America messaging, everything shifted. He moved from praise to direct confrontation, and his answer was blunt. Maher argued that years of negative messaging from within the Democratic Party had shaped how young Americans see their country. Instead of being taught to appreciate progress, he said they were taught to focus solely on flaws. And now, when leaders try to reignite pride in America, that message no longer lands. It was a turning point in his segment, bold, unfiltered, and impossible to ignore.
The Constitution are best described as villains. Wow. It's amazing, since in 1776, James Monroe was 18, Alexander Hamilton was 21, and James Madison 25. Joe Biden was only 30. America's founders, they were the Gen Z of their day. And when they were your age, they started a country. What the fuck have you done?
Maher's question to Gen Z hit hard. What the hell have you done? It wasn't a dismissal. It was a challenge rooted in responsibility. His point wasn't about launching revolutions, but about stepping up. If you're going to harshly judge those who built a country, you should also be prepared to build something better in its place. So far, Maher argued, Gen Z has shown more interest in tearing down systems than creating anything lasting. And that's the real danger. Because criticizing from a distance is easy. Building something meaningful takes vision, resilience, and risk. Maher's warning was clear. If we only focus on the failures of the past without learning from them, we risk falling into a new kind of failure. The failure to create, to lead, and to move society forward in a real and lasting way.
The Constitution isn't perfect because it wasn't written by Taylor Swift, but... And yes, the founders made excruciating compromises, obviously slavery. But slavery was a deal breaker for the southern states. So there would have been two countries. And then to end slavery in North America, it would have involved invading a sovereign nation instead of having the moral high ground of keeping a union together. Would that have been better? History's complicated, and Gen Z reasoning is not. They think they're pure, but they're really just simplistic. They know two things. White people did some very bad things, and no, that's it. That's all they know.
After calling out Gen Z's lack of historical perspective, Maher zoomed in on a deeper issue, society's obsession with moral purity. He wasn't defending the Founding Fathers as flawless. Far from it. He openly acknowledged the facts. The Constitution was written by white men, it was imperfect, and slavery was a painful, deeply unjust compromise. But Maher pushed back on the idea that these flaws render the entire American experiment worthless. He reminded viewers that slavery was not a uniquely American sin. It existed in nearly every major civilization throughout history, across continents, cultures, and religions, including references in the Bible. It was brutal. It was wrong. And yes, it was everywhere. His message was clear. Acknowledging past injustice is necessary, but erasing historical context or dismissing progress entirely doesn't lead to growth. It leads to self-destruction.
I know that too. But I also know other things. Like how in 1776, slavery was a lot like flying private today. If you could afford to, you would have done it too. Everybody did it, of all races, throughout history, in the Bible, and all over the world. If you hate George Washington for slavery, are you prepared to hate the woman king? Because her empire was built on it too. And where do you imagine is this place, outside of your brilliant, pure minds, that's so much better than America? At least America self-corrects, a mechanism for which was actually written into the Constitution.
And then Maher asked the uncomfortable question. Where is this better country everyone keeps fantasizing about? You don't care about people being smuggled into China. You don't see families risking their lives to sneak into Russia. No one's paying smugglers to get into Iran. And yet here in the United States, we often talk about our own system as if it's a failed, cruel experiment. Meanwhile, the rest of the world still sees America as the gold standard for hope and opportunity. That's the contradiction Maher called out. We can't claim the country is fundamentally broken while ignoring the millions who would give anything just for a chance to start over here. And that, he warned, should tell us something. Maybe the problem isn't the country. Maybe the problem is how some people choose to see it.
The irony is, in all this, is that the world the founders birthed, flawed though it may be, provides the bedrock for everything that makes life good for the very people who hate them so much. It's so easy to take for granted individual liberty, a Bill of Rights, the rule of law, checks and balances, getting a trial by jury, the peaceful transfer of power, protecting minority rights, and democracy itself. But those are the things that make our pampered, privileged, bratty lives so relatively cushy.
Maher warned that Americans have grown so accustomed to their safety net, they no longer realize how rare it truly is. He called it what it is: pampered, privileged, and out of touch. Not because people shouldn't strive for better, but because many have lost perspective on just how fortunate they already are compared to much of the world. His message was clear. If you keep tearing down the very system that gives you second chances, don't be surprised when those chances start to disappear.
Even our poor people are fat. Not everyone has to be bribed. Anyone can get rich. The cops are flawed, but we're not a police state. The drinks don't make you go blind, and no one pushes you out of a window for a bad Yelp review. Our government takes a lot and fucks up a lot, but it also gives a lot. Healthcare, retirement, money, unemployment, disability, college grants, food stamps. Maybe in the blissfully perspective-free mind, this all adds up to a low bar that America has reached. But you have to ask, why do millions of people every year risk their lives to come here?
Maher's message wasn't about defending the past. It was about defending the structure that makes progress possible, even when history is flawed. He put it bluntly. Americans have confused comfort with failure. Because things aren't perfect, they assume the system is broken. But what they miss is that the ability to even say that out loud without punishment proves the system is working. His point was powerful. You want to protest America? Fine. But the only reason you can protest without fear is because America allows it, and that's not something guaranteed everywhere else. Maher reminded viewers that once you lose those freedoms, they don't return just because you shout louder. What you get instead is what much of the world lives with every day: silence, surveillance, and consequences.
Because they want what we got. The founders were flawed, but they did build a place the whole world wants to break into. No one is paying a coyote to smuggle them into India or Russia. Immigrants don't see us as the problem. They see us as the solution. And there's a reason they kill themselves to get here, and it's not just the ponds full of delicious ducks and geese.
Despite all its flaws, America still represents something unique: a shot at dignity, freedom, and self-determination. But if we keep vilifying the founders, the system, and the Constitution, if we treat every mistake as disqualifying instead of instructive, if we cancel everything and everyone tied to the country's roots, we risk destroying the last place on earth that millions still see as worth striving and even dying for. That was Maher's message. Not a defense of the past, but a warning about throwing away the future. Because when the system collapses, it's not just the elites who lose. It's everyone. Maher didn't say anything magical. He simply said what many are too afraid to say out loud. America isn't perfect. But for most, it's the best shot at freedom they'll ever get. If that's not worth defending, what is?